Welcome to On Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Rod Babers. Time for Second Watch with Rod Babers, brought to you by our friends over at Duck Camp. We'll talk about them a little bit later. Rod B, I got to ask you, your second watch, first impressions on that second watch.
Honestly, I felt like it was one of the more violent games I think I've seen from the Texas defense. And I'm not, talking about equating that with necessarily physicality or really good technique. But I felt like there was a violence that the Texas defense played with all throughout the game. And it wasn't just one player. I mean, I can cite several players. When you're talking about Jelani McDonald, or you're talking about Warren Roberson, Xavier Phil-Samita, Anthony Smith was trying to get some, Alex January. I mean, I felt like there were 7 to 8 guys or maybe more that when I watched it, I felt like at one point they delivered a violent blow. Or they instigated a violent collision. And like I said, didn't always run their feet, didn't always wrap up, but there was a violent intent. So I felt like, that it stood out to me. I mean, I thought watching it initially that there was some big hits in the game and it got really physical, but Texas played with kind of a violent intensity in the game and it spread throughout the defense. I thought that was something that stood out. I bet Muschamp like that violent intent guys played with in that matchup.
That's good point, because that going into the game, obviously Texas down on defense, at least from a numbers perspective, out 6 starters on defense, but they tried to your point, it wasn't for a lack of effort on Saturday. On Wednesday, Michigan certainly tried to run the ball and had some success, but Texas went after it a little bit. Rod, my thought on this game, and one that you and I talked about in the immediate aftermath, was the play of Arch Manning. What did you see from him on second watch? Your main thoughts there.
It was interesting, man. There's so much to kind of to discuss here. I think ultimately, him being such a great off-schedule scrambling quarterback and threat really stood out. He had his season high in scramble attempts. By the way, had 7 of them, and season high in scramble yards in this matchup too. And I think, I think he had 1 scramble drill throw. That was all. So on the season still, I mean, you're talking about over 8 yards per rush against Power 4 teams on scramble runs for Arch. Now you're talking about over 11 yards per attempt on scramble throws from Arch, and over 9.5 yards per play. This is versus Power 4 teams. It is a weapon. You can make the argument it may be Texas' best weapon potentially on offense, and it's when the play breaks down. He was magnificent there and aggressive too. I know there was a clip floating around the internet of him saying, I'm just gonna stop giving a what. And I wonder if maybe that is him. Like, no, I'm gonna tuck it and run it. When I see it, I'm gonna tuck it and run it. I see it, and then, like I said, this was the most scrambles he's had all season long. That stood out. Also, with the lack of wide receiving, weapons, obviously. Going into the game without DeAndre Moore, and then guys getting injured in the game. Ryan Wingo, Emmitt Mosley, the down the field passing game really suffered. You were only 4 of 11 actually on passes 10 plus yards down the field, according to Pro Football Focus. And you can remember all of them, right? There were 2 3rd and 10s. Texas ran that dagger concept, which is a deep dig route for the number 1 receiver on the outside. That was Ryan Wingo both times. And then the inside receiver, whether number 2 or number 3, is going to run a deep 9 route, basically an inside fade route. And that dig route is going to come right underneath when that safety when that wide receiver clears out that safety. And they ran it twice on 3rd and 10. It's one of their most successful concepts on 3rd and 10. And then you had the injury 17-yard touchdown, and then you had the Lockett touchdown. I mean, that was pretty much your 4. Those were your 4 passes downfield, 10 plus yards downfield. Everything else was done within that 10 plus 10 to 0 yard frame or behind the line of scrimmage throws, quick screens, and it was just Arch's legs were pretty much the biggest weapon Texas had offensively toward the end of the game. So it just showed you the dimensions in Arch's game, even when you don't have the full complement of the offense.
You mentioned that not having the full complement of the offense, wide receivers majorly dinged up. Christian Clark also subbing in for Trey Wisner, who's off to the portal. your thoughts on that wide receiver room and how they played without Emmett Mosley for most of the game and without Ryan Wingo in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Khalil Lockett is one of the guys that I think he had 4 targets overall. If you go look at the amount of targets he had, and one of them was I think he forced a pass interference call. One was that touchdown. I think he had a 5-yard reception that was to make a really quick, maybe middle screen.
It was a waggle.
Yeah. It was a waggle. Okay, yeah, that concept. And then that was another incompletion. But I mean, think about that. I mean, didn't play a lot and got a lot of target share. And they were trying to hit him downfield. You can tell Sark that was one of his intentions, to get him the football downfield. So I thought he took advantage of the snaps that he had. I was a little disappointed. McCutcheon getting more reps that he didn't take advantage. Beautiful, what they call kind of a fox play, where he kind of fakes the screen. He's going to fake like he's going to block for the screen, and then he runs that kind of wheel concept to the outside. And beautiful throw right in the window, right in the bucket by Arch, and he dropped it. I mean, so it's a little disappointing, the drops by the wide receivers overall. Whether you're talking about the stars and the frontline guys before the injury, or even like I said, Dalen McCutcheon, one of the younger guys who was getting some time. But I liked what I saw from Khalil Lockett. I'll give him a lot of props. I think among the young wide receivers, maybe he's the guy that stepped up and kind of maximized those opportunities.
Interesting. You think Texas needs to go to the portal for a wide receiver based on what you saw on Wednesday?
Yes, there's no doubt. Now, whether you need to go for 2 is the question. Whether you need to go for multiple wide receivers, because a lot of people believe, and I'm among those, if you're going to go to wide receiver, if you're going to go to the portal to get a wide receiver, go get a dude. Go get the guy that's a game changer for you, potentially, considering what we saw from Arch. And if that is the case, then they're going to spend a lot of money for the top of the wide receiver market. Though will that force, will Texas have more attrition at the wide receiver position? That's something we don't know either. So I would say, yes, you definitely need to address wide receiver. It's an area of need. Do you need to go get multiple guys? Is the question. Do you need to kind of rebuild that room? Do you have that? Is that lack of faith in the young guys and trust in the young guys? That's the question, I think, going into it.
Yeah, it seems like they've got some work to do in the portal. There could be attrition forthcoming from the wide receiver room as well, and you think they need one regardless.
Yeah,
so I think that we could end up with 2 there. It just all depends on who's available. Cam Coleman, obviously the wide receiver from Auburn, is a name that's been mentioned with Texas. But I will say, I would add this. I feel like right now, Rod, in watching this game a second time myself, that they need touchdown scorers on offense combined with Arch, because as you guys talked about, Arch is the play right now. He needs someone to join him as a touchdown scorer next year. They do that, and that's a big opportunity for this offense to take a next step.
Yeah, they need another player that defenses are forced to try to take away. They don't have that. Wide receiver that has gravity, meaning it attracts defenders to him. A running back that forces you to have to stack the box in certain situations. Right now, Arch is the identity of the offense, and he is your most lethal threat. And I think, I don't know if it's ironic or not and how much Sark likes it, but like I said, your best play and concept all season long pretty much has been Arch and the scramble drill. Like that, and among your most explosive concepts. So I got a little stat for you I don't know if it's good or bad, but if you go look at your 20+ yard runs on the season, overall, over 20% of them were scrambles. And over 20% of your 10+ yard runs were scrambles on the season. So it's a big, but it doesn't happen a lot. I mean, you're not talking about being a play that happens a ton. There's only a certain situations where you can even have a scramble, and usually you're talking about a 5 to 7% scramble rate usually. But when he does it, it pops. So I think for Texas, you need something else other than that. That's great as a cheat code, as an added complement or component. But the reason I've talked about it so much this year is because you can make the argument it's your best concept. And it's the best to me, the most lethal component of the offense. And that probably shouldn't be the case, but it is. It does show you that when you put it on Arch's shoulders, he can deliver. That's more what it shows me.
One of the things you wrote down that you wanted me to ask you about is what Sark's recipe was against the heavy blitz from Wink Martindale that we saw on Wednesday. What was his recipe or counter to Martindale's heavy blitz presence?
Yeah, he's just big on the screen game. I went and looked at the top 3 teams Texas played in terms of blitz rate. Michigan was the highest. They were that's a top 3 team in blitz rate. Oklahoma was top 5. Vanderbilt was top 10. And those, I don't think was a coincidence. In those games, you also had your highest screen rate in terms of the highest number of screens, not screen rate, but the highest number of screens you threw in the game. You had 13 screens. That's the season high for Texas in this game versus Michigan. You had 9 versus Oklahoma, and you had 11 screens you threw versus Vanderbilt. I mean, that's an average of, you're talking about 11 screens on average in those 3 games. So it's pretty clear that Sark, he wants to get the ball out of Arch's hands quickly, try to get it in the hands of his playmakers really quickly. And that's a diverse, variety of screens, right? Tight end screens, middle screens, bubble screens, tunnel screens, the wide receiver quick smoke screens. He does a ton. They have the quintessential Sark screen, right? The misdirection screen, traditional screens to running back. So it just shows you how deep he is in his bag, if you will, of innovative ways to utilize the screen game against these heavy blitz teams. So that's not a coincidence. That's something that I think you can count on anytime you see Sark going up against a team where they have extremely high blitz rates and they're going to bring an extra guy or 2.
Interesting. All right, Rod, before we go on to the part you want to talk about the defense, I want to tell folks about our sponsor, Duck Camp. Duck Camp gear is made for the people that live for the moments out there where there are fish to catch, birds to hunt, time to kill, and football to watch. They like doing all that stuff. So they built a company centered on it, based in Austin and dedicated to giving people best-in-class hunting and fishing apparel. There are those of you out there that look forward to the opening day of hunting season like a kickoff of a Longhorn football game or like a 5-year-old on Christmas morning. Duck Camp is here to let you know from opening day to game day, they've got you covered. Make sure you check out duckcamp.com. Use promo code ONTexas25 for 25% off. That is ONTexas25 for 25% off. Rod B., you mentioned you wanted to talk about what Texas did differently with Johnny Nansen calling the plays on Wednesday. You said he stepped away maybe a little bit from what Texas had seen in the past or done in the past with Pete Kwiatkowski. What did you see from Johnny Nansen in the Texas defense?
Well, if you look at Johnny Nansen, at least, his last time calling plays at Arizona, there's no doubt they led the Power 5 in single high rates. That's one deep safety in the middle of the field. What they call middle of the field closed. They led the Power 5 in the amount of single high safeties they had that season. And that's your cover 3s and that's your cover 1s mostly. And so when he's influence here at Texas, no shock at all. This season, Texas also one of the national leaders in the Power 4 in single high rate, with a lot of cover 3 and even up in their man coverage rate to around 23-24%. So that's that Johnny Nansen influence. And so if you're studying Nansen, which I'm sure Michigan was, it's like, okay, if Nansen's calling the plays, then we know they're going to play a lot of single high, a lot of, cover 1, a lot of cover 3. Well, in this matchup, I was a little surprised. They had a lot more 2 high shell coverages and even had what I think, I got to go back and check all of my notes now. I think it may have been the most 3 high looks that we saw all season. I mean, they were probably between 15 to 20% of their coverages at least showed a 3 high shell. And they used Grayson Littleton at times as a nickel, as the guy that would drop back as at 3 high safety, and have either Jonah Williams as an inverted defender or Jelani McDonald at times as that inverted defender. So I was really surprised how often they had the 3 high up there. So they broke tendency because this season Texas was 70+%. Single high safeties in this game. That was not the case. You were close to probably 65% of your snaps. Texas was playing 2 high safeties and or 3 high, because when they get out into 3 high, they oftentimes will rotate into basically that inverted Tampa 2 look. where they have two deep safeties and invert that single safety down to linebacker or that second level. So I had not seen all season. Texas had been pretty loyal to their blueprint of single high safeties for cover 3 and heavy cover 3 and cover 1 usage. But in this game, they broke tendency. And I think maybe it's because they didn't want to give up a lot of deep, easy completions potentially to Michigan, which they didn't. But also, I think it was just a way for Texas to kind of change it up. I think that it was a tendency break, especially the 3 high thing. I think Johnny Nansen, one that is innovative, exotic looks that we know from Johnny Nansen kind of bleeding through to the game plan because we saw a lot of it in different situations too.
Yeah, it seemed to confuse Bryce Underwood late in the game.
Yeah,
he clearly was not. He was discombobulated and throwing off his back foot and all kinds of things. Rod, last but not least, you wanted to talk about the young players getting some time and then doing something with it when they got that time. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know how much people put in Pro Football Focus, but it is I think a data point for you to consider when you're evaluating players and looking at their performance. But if you're just looking at Pro Football Focus, I mean, you're talking about guys who had career days overall. If you're looking at, first of all, even just looking at the production, Ty Anthony Smith was unbelievable. And I don't know if he's considered a young guy, but he played the most snaps of anybody on defense. And he did a lot with it. Right? The 2 interceptions and a tackle for loss, was your leader in tackles. If you look at it, Bo Barnes, Pro Football Focus had him as your highest graded run defender. Have Alex January as the second highest graded run defender. We know what Christian Clark did, right? I mean, career high in rushing yards for him. Wardale Mack was your highest graded player by Pro Football Focus. I understand. Arch was like 3rd behind Rowan Roberson, by the way, who was the second highest graded player. But my point, not to ridicule Pro Football Focus grades or to prop them up, but these are players who, with the most snaps they've had, arguably in their career, they maximized them. I mean, Rowan Roberson had his best game I've ever seen. I mean, Rowan Roberson been criticized a lot on this channel, and I have been one to criticize him at times for his play, but I will applaud him. He had a hell of a game. He should have had a forced fumble in that game too. When he forced Underwood to have to go over the top when he stonewalled the lead blocker on the goal line. So he had a great game, and Wardale Mack had a really, really good game. So it was just so many guys, that I looked at that had, I thought, the best games that I have watched them play. And maybe it was a few snaps, maybe it was a lot of snaps, like Ty Anthony Smith. But you got to feel good about that in terms of the guys who it meant a lot to them. And we know we've talked a lot about the guys who opted out and the guys who weren't available for Texas. But for those guys, those young players, this game meant the world to them. It meant everything to them. I know in the NIL rev share area and all that, and I know they probably had decisions to make, and this is probably a resume game for them, whether they're staying or leaving. But the pride was evident in these young guys when they got a chance to get those snaps. So that was promising that you had so many players who had career days when they had their most snaps that they've had all season, or probably in their career.
Time to step up and make the next move for them. You mentioned Alex January, by the way. Earlier today, we reported that Alex January has decided to sign and return to the University of Texas for his junior year as well. Young man out of Duncanville, Texas. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of On Texas Football. Once again, brought to you by our friends over at duckcamp.com. Use promo code ONTexas25 for 25% off. That's duckcamp.com. Promo code ONTexas25 for 25% off. For Rod Babers and our producer, Matt Hutchison, I'm Bobby Burton. We'll have more today on the portal and more as this gets going. You guys have a good one. Hook 'em horns.
Hook 'em.